Questions.
Uh, yeah, so I was wondering about like the AI, like how AI will impact and change the landscape of people feeling lonely. I watched that movie Ex Machina, and you can have AI that can basically look as good, like they can that can basically be as look like as humans, and we can't really differentiate. If we can't differentiate, then will that fulfill the loneliness that we feel?
Have you seen Her, the movie Her?
Yeah, yeah, I have seen her. Yeah,
What'd you think?
with her because it was just a voice. It didn't. Yeah, I didn't felt and like it just felt very artificial because it was just a voice.
Okay,
If
that's interesting. Okay, go ahead.
with the movie Ex Machina, uh, it was like as long as I can tell that it's an AI, it feels artificial. It's only when I can't tell by the behaviors or by like as long as logically I know it's an AI, but as long as it doesn't come up in the interaction, then I'm okay with that. I feel like it's a human and I can get attached to that AI, whatever it is. But it's only when it's off in some way, then it feels artificial and I wanna disconnect.
Do you mean the, what do they call it? The Valley of the Uncanny Valley, right? You're familiar with the Uncanny Valley, right?
I forgot what that was.
So if you
Yeah.
look at man's attempt to emulate man or
Mm-hmm.
woman, uh, there's this curve where humans will accept it, like we accept Siri and we accept Alexa and we accept Google, but they aren't trying to be so realistic, right? But then as
Mm-hmm.
you start to get more and more realistic, there's a valley where it just gets freaky. It just gets weird and uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
where the AIs become just, people don't want anything to do with them because they're too creepy. That's the
Mm-hmm.
uncanny valley. And then when you come up, I think it's uncanny valley. I could be wrong with the wording, but the phenomenon is real. And then as you come up from that valley, people don't they don't care anymore, and they assign personhood
Mm-hmm.
to the AI. So before we get to loneliness, there's other questions that are raised constantly by a certain subgroup of the population about personhood for these machines. That they will
Mm-hmm.
have minds, and therefore they're persons, even if they're not human. What do you think of that?
Uh, I think to me it's just like a machine, and because it's a machine, I personally can't like attach personhood to that.
Okay. What
And
about to a corporation? Can you attach personhood to a corporation?
to a corporation, I mean, because it has people involved in it, so I feel empathy towards the people. But as a to a corporation as an entity itself, like let's say if I wanna shut down a corporation,
Mm-hmm.
but still the people in the corporation are taken care of, then I'm totally okay with that. Like I don't attach personhood to the corporation in that way.
But the law does, right? Legally, they are. I mean, they have. I'm not a lawyer, but apparently they do have personhood, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so we have legal, we have visual, and we have, let's say, social or interpersonal. And those dimensions, I
Hmm.
think we have to look at separately.
Hmm.
So now, what is your question? Your question is about whether or not the AIs will relieve loneliness.
Yeah, whether they can relieve the loneliness, like the
Do you
yeah
know
that
anyone
people.
with an AI girlfriend?
Sorry.
Do you know anyone with an AI girlfriend?
Uh, will I want an AI
No.
girlfriend?
Do you know anyone who has an AI girlfriend?
Oh, oh, no, I don't know.
There's some guy in Miami that's spending, I don't know, like $120,000 a year on his AI girlfriends. Uh, I think that's all going to depend on the person. I mean, people can make relationships with all kinds of things, with their cars. You know, some men treat their cars like women. And although you wouldn't say it relieves loneliness in the way we usually think of loneliness, it takes their mind off of their loneliness, right? Or takes their minds off their problems. And so it's, I guess, a form of entertainment or some kind of relationship.
Distraction, like
I think
distraction.
it all is going to depend on the character structure, the temperament, and the empathy modules or lack thereof in the person who's relating to the machine, at least in the beginning.
Hmm.
Now, in Ex Machina, the test was to see, wasn't the test to see whether or not he could fall in love with the machine?
That was the idea of the creator
Uh-huh.
of the machine.
And he did fall in love with the machine.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Can you imagine yourself in that scenario with a an attractive, life size? You know, it's clearly a robot. You could see the. I mean, they left all the glass or whatever, the plexiglass, so you could see
Hmm.
that she's always tell that she's a robot pretty much, unless she
Hmm.
was dressed.
Hmm.
Can you imagine developing that kind of relationship with that level of AI?
So what I have noticed with myself is sometimes I get used to people that I get used to having people around. So like I'm not even like talking to them, but just having their presence,
Yes.
that feels good. So at that level, I think I can get attached to an AI that I like having the presence, but but like having them as a person, like as a relationship, like someone I want to spend time with,
Hmm.
that is still kind of hard for me to imagine.
What if she helped you with all kinds of things? Like she helped you with work, she did your work for you, you know, or she did your taxes and she cleaned up the house and she answered any question you might have about anything, right? And she was tuned to be a great conversationalist, to have the emotionality and the empathy.
Hmm.
Although it's not
I think.
real in the one
Mhm.
sense, it's programmed to be very realistic, like as in the movie.
So I think what I would be what I am unsure of is what if they start taking care of me, like they start taking care of me like a
Reading you
like
stories
how.
at bedtime so you fall asleep,
Yeah,
saying
or
soothing
like
things.
yeah, like when I get sick, then they'd like take care of me,
Right.
like the things will like the times when I need affection, then it would be, yeah, I don't know, it would be
Or if you
harder.
felt anxious, they would know how to soothe you because they can read your pupils and your vital signs, your breath rate, and they know what to say to like calm you down, etc.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think you've kind of answered your own question, haven't you?
Yeah, I think it depends on the needs. Like for every person, they have different needs. So if they can kind of fulfill those needs, then that bond can develop.
Correct. So I think the question's answered. I mean, you answered it for yourself, which is always better.
Hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
It's a strange world we're walking into
Mhm.
if we make it. All right.
Cool.
Question. Another question.
Yeah, the next question is from the book Dream Conversation,
Okay.
and
Good.
this is from page 40, not judging others.
You know, this book I've said it's intermediate, but there are places when it goes quite advanced, right? But on the other
Hmm.
hand, it has all the basic elements that you need. I mean, you just need a little background in Buddhism, right? I think now I'm speaking to the audience or whoever's listening. You need a basic background in Buddhism, in particular, two things: emptiness and compassion. Emptiness is the lack of inherent existence of anything over time, for example, but it's much more than that. It's that we can't really lay hands on anything scientifically or logically over time or over space or over or even rationally. it's empty of inherent existence. There's nothing that exists in this world that exists inherently on its own, and that the emptiness implies the no boundary and the no separateness of this world. So if you have a handle on that, and then you have a handle on compassion, which is the other major root of Buddhism, then you can go to a book like this, and it covers quite a few other things that are quite nice. So what page are we on?
Page 40.
And also, I should mention, it's translated by not only a genius translator, but also an enlightened man, Thomas Cleary, who left us just a few years ago, tragically, for us. But he left a lot for us to work with. Thank you, Thomas Cleary. Okay, so what page? 40?
Page 40.
All right. Do you mind if I
Not
read it?
judging us.
I'm going to read it. Not judging others. It is said that people who are truly on the way do not discuss judgments of others. This does not mean that they make judgment but suppress them. It means that they do not see people in terms of self and other. The third patriarch of Zen said, quote, "In the realm of being as is, there is no other and no self," end quote. A scripture says, quote, "The nature of reality is like an ocean. You should not say there is right or wrong," end quote. If people view the world in terms of distinctions between others and self, they will inevitably make judgments of right and wrong. If they entertain views of right and wrong, they are not true practitioners of the way, even if they refrain from expressing their views. Rather than try to refrain from discussing judgments of others, therefore, students of Buddhism should turn around and reflect, who is it that speaks of others' right and wrong? Quote, "Who is it that speaks of others' right and wrong?" A scripture says that people, quote, "take the physical constitution to be their own body and take the reflections of sense data to be their own mind," end quote. Beautiful. What this scriptural saying means is that what ordinary people think to be their self is not the true self. And if you do not know what your true self is, you cannot see others as they really are either. So if your ideas of self and others are both untrue, how can you judge right and wrong? I'm going to reread that. So if your ideas of self and others are both untrue, how can you judge right and wrong? Ordinarily, people who assume they are on the way and do not talk about others' right and wrong still define good and bad in their minds and make distinctions of sharpness and dullness in people. Conceptualizing shallowness and depth of understanding, they contrast error and correctness of practice. Such people cannot proceed directly towards supreme enlightenment, so they are encouraged not to pay attention to the judgments of right and wrong. Okay? So now that is fairly advanced, and hold on to the question, but I want to introduce folks to another just incredibly valuable book. This one is more advanced. It's called the Treasury of the Eye of True Teaching, Classic Stories and Discourses and Poems of the Chan Tradition. Now, Chan just means Zen in Chinese. So the Zen that we're most familiar with is Japan and Korea, but it came from China. And Dahui in the 10th and the 11th centuries, his students put together a book of stories, discourses, and poems, and they're gorgeous, but they are difficult. You have to kind of immerse yourself in the time and the period but anyway, so this, I introduce you to this book. It's one of the precious heritages for humanity, and as is Zen, and we mustn't lose these things. And all this fuss about AI, there's in all this fuss about AI, there's the danger of losing some of the most precious things we have, and Zen would be counted among that. All right, so what's the question?
Yeah, so the question is about the difference between...
Alexa, I wasn't asking you. They're always listening.
Your feedback will help improve the experience.
Okay. Okay. So what's the question?
Well, so the question was differentiating between like judging right and wrong versus kind of knowing that I know better. So,
Do you know
so
better?
sometimes I feel that, that I know better than
Yes,
what
and
other
that's
people
that's
are
it.
telling.
That's normal, and of course, and that's to be expected. But see, this is where it gets tricky, because before you can get to the stage of going beyond right and wrong, you have to be morally straight. I mean, you have to be ethically, and you have to be a good person. So this thing would be poison in the wrong hands, right?
Mhm.
So I mean, there's certain things that are common sense, and certain things that are foundationally Buddhist or Christian or Muslim, and for example, and these they're assuming those have already been interiorized as a pragmatic matter. When after you awaken, you realize that all those things are completely, it's like a dream. So if you have a dream, is there a right and wrong in the dream?
No, in the dream, it doesn't really matter. Like anything, nothing matters.
Well, it does while you're dreaming, right?
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
this world is in fact a dream world. This world is uh, a creation. For ease of speaking, we'll say it's a creation of the brain, and the brain
Hmm.
certainly does seem to be a modulator of it. But then we, of course, we have to remember that the brain itself is also illusory. And so here, let me, if I might, I was reading this morning, and there's just so happens that this is directly related to that. This is on page 141. The essence of awareness, complete and clear, is a formless body. Just that one sentence. The essence of awareness, complete and clear, is a formless body. Don't mistake far and near based on intellectual opinion. When thoughts differ, you're blind to the substance of the mysterious. When mind diverges, you're not neighbor to the way. When subjectively discriminating myriad things, you get submerged in the objects before you. When conscious awareness is fragmented, you lose the basic reality. If you understand such expressions with complete clarity, you'll wind up unburdened as you were before, as before you were born. Okay, so here we go, one more time. The essence of awareness, complete and clear, is a formless body. Don't mistake far and near based on intellectual opinion. When thoughts differ, you're blind to the substance of the mysterious. When the mind diverges, you're not neighbor to the way. When subjectively discriminating myriad things, you get submerged in the objects before you. When conscious awareness is fragmented, you lose the basic reality. If you understand such expressions with complete clarity, you'll wind up unburdened as you were before. We have some repairman here, and it's quite a distracting. Okay, so here again, the essence of awareness, complete and clear, is a formless body. Don't mistake far and near based on intellectual opinions. When thoughts differ, you're blind to the substance of the mysterious. So far and near, you could also say right and wrong. And just as in a dream, we're not in a position to say what's right and wrong, right? And if you're living in a dream world, divorced from reality, then what business do we have judging right and wrong? And also, if you look at right and wrong, and this is Rumi. Rumi says, for example, there's a field beyond right and wrong. The famous Sufi Rumi. Meet me there. So if we can follow what seems wrong, and if you follow it long enough, it'll turn into right. Or you can follow what's right, and sooner or later it's going to turn into wrong.
Hmm.
Do you see what I'm saying? If you just logically.
Hmm.
So this is nuanced, and it relies on an assumption that you've got your heart on straight and your head on straight.
Hmm.
So that's what I mean by intermediate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Is there
Yeah.
a problem? Is there an area where you find it problematic?
Mm, I think so. Usually, it's not a problem. So, like usually, when I function, it's not a problem when people have differing views because everyone because I'm not like thinking actively. I'm on automatic, so it's not a problem. It's only when people try to force me or advise me to do some things in a certain way, and my makeup is that I'm just like it just feels like wrong to go about things that way, not productive, like not conducive to my purpose.
Okay, I think that okay. So wrong means different things, right? It can also mean incorrect. If you're trying to climb a
Hmm.
ladder and you've got it pointed sideways, that's incorrect, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
If you're trying to go up and you go down, that's incorrect. I mean, that's not the issue,
Hmm.
right?
Okay.
And of course, I
Yeah.
mean, things can be wrong or incorrect in the moment, right?
Hmm.
If you go to the store and you want to buy eggs, but instead you buy bread, that's wrong in the
Hmm.
moment. So none of this, you can't get silly, I guess is another way to
Hmm.
put it.
Hmm.
But this notion of the intellectual distinctions, I think, is vitally important because we arbitrarily assign uh, ways of looking at the world to the world. And for example, we see the universe as big, but the universe can also be envisioned as infinitesimally small. Or we see
Hmm.
ourselves as big compared to an infinitesimally small universe, but we could just as easily see ourselves as very, very, very tiny, smaller than the period on a page. We could see ourselves, or we could see the planet that size, and depending on which scale you use. And so, in the realm of the relative, in relative reality, all of these things are arbitrary. Duration of time, size, uh, and to some extent, true and false, because it all depends on the vantage point. And I think that that's
Hmm.
one of the things that's being learned in physics now is that there are scales of minds much smaller than ours, and probably much bigger than ours. Now they're not
Hmm.
necessarily talking about consciousness; they're talking about minds, and we'll
Hmm.
get into that later if that comes up. So does that answer? So do you have more questions about that right and wrong and self and other?
Uh, no, not anymore. It's just that when I read that, like when I read that chapter, it basically to me it meant that okay, it's a chapter on humility and compassion. So if I have humility and compassion, then this thing will automatically be taken care of.
And insight. Because remember, as Jesus taught, treat the other as yourself. Or he also said, what you do unto the least of these, you do unto me. So, yes, there's compassion, but there's also deep insight because you realize that this self and other thing is totally illusory. You're talking to yourself right now, whether you realize it or not. You've,
Mhm.
you've, you've created a teacher here to tell you what, in fact, you already know at the
Mhm.
deepest levels, and vice versa. So in the realm of reality, the rules that of the relative rules that we've grown up with don't apply, and in the realm of eternity, same thing. Eternity being outside of time and space. But it's
Mhm.
fascinating, and I keep repeating this because it's so wonderful to see the serious scientists now beginning to acknowledge what we've known since we've had written history, probably before that, that time and space are emergent. They are not fundamental. They emerge from
Mhm.
something else. In other words, the mind.
Mhm.
Because what exists
Mhm.
without observation?
Sorry, can you repeat that? What
What
is?
exists without observation? can we say that anything exists without observation of it?
No, no, I mean we need to have an observer for.
Yeah, for it to be real. All right.
Mhm.
Fun stuff.
I have a follow-up on that. So in your last video, you talked about like having boundaries. So like I think you were talking about how with two people, there's not a real boundary between two people, and that is kind of a hint that
2 people, 4
yeah,
people, 20
yeah.
million people, a billion people. The boundaries are illusory. What's the question?
So the boundaries are illusory, but at least in experience, they seem real. So like when I
Oh,
talk
but
to
they are
another
real
person,
too. They can be real and illusory. And this is where Zen is very good, right? So just because something's illusory doesn't mean it's not real. Because what do we mean by real? By real, we mean subjectively true. Our real is subjective.
yeah.
So it could be both not real and real at the same time.
Mhm.
But for example, money is completely imaginary. It's like a consensus view, right? And I read today that they're going to stop letting people use cash, just to buy popcorn and hot dogs at the ball game. So money is completely a substrate independent idea that everybody's bought into, but it's nothing more than an idea. So it's real. I mean, wars are fought over it, people are killed over it, but it's not real at the same time. I mean, that's a trivial example, but that gives you an example of how something can be real and unreal at the same time. And walking with this understanding is a lot of the way. Okay, sir, follow up? I like these questions, they're fun.
Next question.
Okay, question.
This one is from page 36.
Okay, dream conversations.
Yeah, it's actually a big chapter. So this one is like from the first para, like the top paragraph on this page.
Okay, Zen teaching has no set track or fixed pattern. Or which paragraph?
So the chapter is page 35, softening worldly feelings.
Okay.
But then the thing I wanted to ask was in the last paragraph of this chapter, so which is like the first paragraph on the next page.
Okay.
Not seeking what you think.
Let me read it, okay? Not seeking what you think is there is the doorway to finding out what is actually there, beyond your imagination. Only finding without seeking is called meeting the source everywhere. Yeah. So this is very profound. So let me just summarize the first part of the paragraph. Of the section. It's called Softening Worldly Feelings. And it notes that the founder of Zen spoke of 2 ways to access awakening, by principle and by practice. Access by principle refers to the direct unification with the fundamental without depending on training. Since this is not possible for everyone, the founder also taught 4 practices. And so these practices are listed on page 35. And they're used to equilibrate the mind. And so now we get to the paragraph that you're asking about. Not seeking what you think is there is the doorway to finding out what is actually there beyond your imagination. So there we go. What's the question?
So my question is, it's again like the question is, how can I go about something without having a motive? So like, let's say if the motive is to awaken.
You're missing the point. The point is about if you go, let's say you go looking for Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster. Pick one of those 2. Bigfoot or Loch Ness, pick one.
Bigfoot.
Okay.
Bigfoot.
And you know that Bigfoot is 7 feet tall, and he's got brown fur, and he's got fangs, and he looks like halfway between a gorilla and a bear. and you go looking for him,
Mhm.
you're going to miss altogether another creature that doesn't look like that at all. Bigfoot just has these big feet, but he's actually only about 2 feet tall, right? And he's got smooth skin. You'll never find that creature with the big foot if you're always looking for a 7-foot bear with fur. Do you see what I'm saying? So if your imagination decides what you're going to look for, you won't find it because you've imagined something. So if you imagine what consciousness is, or the experience of unadulterated consciousness, if you imagine that, that just gets in your way because it's beyond your imagination. I mean, I promise you, it's not something you've ever imagined. It can't be imagined, for one thing. And so all this is doing is it's guarding you against assuming that you know what something is before you found it, because that keeps you from finding it.
Mhm. Yeah.
You see? And it also limits what you can find. So the counsel is to remain open, I think. Let's see. Only finding without seeking is called the source, meeting the source everywhere. Okay. Not seeking what you think is there is the doorway to finding out which is actually there. So if you seek what you think is there, you're going to close the door on what's actually there.
Mhm.
Okay? Now,
Yeah, that makes sense.
meeting the source everywhere, that's a special case. Meeting the source everywhere is walking around in bliss, love, in pure even the word consciousness is wrong because it's aware and creative and luminous. So that's all that's doing is guarding you against using your subjective imagination to limit yourself.
Got it.
We know much less than we imagine about this universe.
Mhm.
Much less. But what's fun is we're starting to acknowledge that. We're beginning to see minds everywhere. And minds are a stepping stone to other things. Okay?
Mhm. I have another question, but this one is
let's go back. But I think also that there's a nuance to your question, which is that how am I supposed to seek without seeking?
so for that, what I understood was it's fine to have a direction, but to be open and flexible at the same time.
Correct. And also, you're preparing yourself to awaken, which makes awakening much more likely. And as you gradually prepare yourself, then the realizations will begin to dawn on you. You've already probably experienced some of these already, right? I mean, usually synchronicities and things like that start to occur, or other, things that are unexpected. And so this is also what's meant by seeking without seeking. Just preparing yourself. All right, I'm sorry. Go ahead. What was the next question?
Yeah, the next one is from page 34, worldly feelings.
Okay.
It's a small one. You can read that if you like.
Worldly feelings. Attraction and aversion are two feelings that keep people within the bondage of ignorant, repetitive behavior. Those who seek only what pleases them and try to avoid what displeases them are acting in this way because they do not realize the nature of the world. For those who know the nature of the world, lack of complete satisfaction or fulfillment in the things of the world is in itself advice to cultivate detachment. If people do not crave to be pleased, they will not be displeased. What causes mental suffering is not the environment itself, but the mind itself. This is just brilliant. I mean, it's so beautifully put. So attraction and aversion, like and dislike, yes and no, are the feelings that keep people within the bondage of ignorant, repetitive behavior. Those who seek only what pleases them and try to avoid what displeases them are acting in this way because they do not realize the nature of the world. For those who know the nature of the world, lack of complete satisfaction or fulfillment in things of the world is in itself advice to cultivate detachment. So look, it's so beautiful. It's saying, I can say with a certain authority that your mind will never be satisfied. Your mind will never be completely gratified and completely at peace for extended periods of time, or fulfilled and gratified for any large duration of time. The mind is not capable of that. The world does not provide us with that kind of world. And so just knowing that no matter how wonderful an episode of your life may be, it's going to be limited in time. That something's going to happen. If you're in bliss, something's going to not ruin the bliss, going to stop that bliss. If you're in agony, something's going to stop the agony. I'm speaking too crudely, but you get my drift, right? Whatever it is, it will pass, whether it's good or bad. Knowing that is advice to a thoughtful person. Don't look for gratification there. Don't look for gratification in just trying to get what you want and trying to avoid what you don't want. And that's the beginning of wisdom. Right? And so the world, all things are teaching at all times, when the world is teaching just that, your mind will never be satisfied.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that seems pretty clear to me, that don't look for satisfaction or gratification from the mind. Look elsewhere. So worldly feelings, go ahead. So worldly feelings are worldly feelings. Okay, go ahead.
I have a question on the application of it, like in life. So usually I feel dragged, like I feel like unpleasant. I don't feel good when I do my job, like do my regular job, because I feel like I can use my time in better ways and I can do like something better. So I was trying to apply this, that maybe I am seeking like some kind of fulfillment or feeling good during the work, and that's causing me, that's making it even harder for me to do the job.
Would you work if you weren't paid? I mean, this work, would you do it? I mean, let's say you had all the money in the world. Would you do it just for the hell of it?
No, I won't.
Right. So you're doing it for the money, right?
I'm doing it to be able to stay in the US. Yeah.
Okay, good. So that's the payment for that.
Yeah.
Now, you may or may not, on any given day, get a feeling of satisfaction or gratification. Maybe, maybe not. But the reason you're working is for the money and for the ancillary benefits, right? So you don't get paid twice. That's a Sufi adage, right? Don't look to get paid twice. So I know that was off a little bit from your question, but I couldn't resist it. So restate the question, please.
Yeah, so like knowing that there's a purpose for which I'm doing it, still it doesn't reduce feeling bad, or feeling like drag when doing the job. And
Cool.
I was figuring out how can I make that experience kind of easier or like more pleasant than that. Maybe I'm craving something. Maybe if I let go of wanting to feel good, maybe that will make it easier.
Absolutely.
But still,
It's your mind that's making you feel bad or feel worse, because you want to be doing something else. Your mind's saying, oh, well, have you ever noticed when you're doing something and you're looking forward to getting on to the next thing? And so you're not really present. So one of the things I've learned, I'm an old man, and so I have the advantages of being an old man. But if you live your life and only do one thing at a time, it's just better. There's less conflict and there's less. So being at work is bad enough, but being at work and then thinking, I should be doing something else, makes it even worse. And that's life. I mean, that's just how the mind is. The mind is chronically dissatisfied. The mind is a real piece of, I mean, I don't want to curse, but it's a real piece of work.
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, it's not there to make you happy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people are happy, and or I shouldn't say happy, joyful, in spite of their minds, not because of it. In
Mm-hmm.
general,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you look
Got
at
it.
art, great art is trying to get you beyond the mind.
Mm-hmm.
And even things like movies. A good movie is something that, I mean, not all of them like this, but many good movies are designed to remove you from your mind for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And something else I've discovered: if you read a book or listen to a book, then your mind doesn't have to do. You can let someone else do the thinking, or do your thinking. It's the same thing, more or less,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it's less energy cost.
Mm-hmm.
So you'll
Mm-hmm.
learn these hacks, as you grow older. You'll learn these hacks in life. But man, this mind thing is evolutionarily, it'll be fun to look back and say, wow, what the hell was that?
Mm-hmm.
Next question.
Yeah. Let me.
The mind is, you just got to have to laugh at the mind,
Mm-hmm.
or you'll cry.
Yeah. The next one is on page 43.
All right, sir.
So I think here they are actually prescribing a method for the practice.
Okay.
It's page 43, just above wrong approaches. So like the last paragraph of the previous chapter, just above wrong approaches. If scholars and intellectuals would take the time.
Okay. Let me, if you don't mind. If scholars and
Yeah.
intellectuals would take the time they spend on trying to foster learned understanding and apply it to direct inquiry into the place where thoughts arise and vanish, and if they would carry on this inquiry throughout all their activities, they would be able to attain entry into enlightenment, just as Nanwei and the professor did. So it's referring to a story.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just read the paragraph before that. This professor had studied Buddhist texts for years and had understood their principles conceptually, but does not have any real experience of enlightenment. Then at one word from the Zen master, "What is it?" he was greatly awakened. What does this mean? Obviously, what he realized was not merely a doctrine or principle. So yeah, this is the huge ocean of difference between knowing and believing or thinking you know. I mean, you could spend, so these intellectuals and scholars, they spend, using a crude metaphor, they spend decades, years and decades and lots of resources understanding, what the taste of an apple must be like, or theories about apples, and digestion and taste and sweetness and all of this, and they'd spend decades and decades and decades. But if they just ate the apple, they would know something vitally important, but that they can't put into scientific formulas, or because it's in another category altogether. And so they're saying that simply, like these guys, and I love them, because they're smart and they're hardworking and they've got integrity, and they're studying the mind, but they're just going around in circles because they conflate mind and consciousness for one thing, and they wouldn't make that mistake if they just spent the time that they spend. What page was it? What page was that?
43.
I mean, he says it beautifully here. If scholars and intellectuals would take the time they spend on trying to foster learned understanding and apply it to direct inquiry into the place where thoughts arise and vanish, and if they would carry on this inquiry throughout their activities, they would be able to attain entry into nirvana. So, and then they would understand what it is that they're looking for. And so we have these brilliant scientists, and they've been doing it for a long time. Not a long time, maybe, let's say a couple of thousand years. And they study the thoughts, and they study the mechanism, and they speculate about this and that and so on and so forth. If they spent the same time investigating directly into the source of these thoughts, they would wake up and they wouldn't make this mistake of conflating mind, which is a mechanism which can be done by a computer, and consciousness itself, which is the original, foundational, creative. I can't even put a word on it, but it's that creates all of this and us and is us. It's wild. So that's all he's speaking to. The intellectual pursuit is very different than the heart pursuit. Now, having said that, though, the reason this comes up a lot is because people say, well, wait a minute, it says in the Tao Te Ching, those who know do not speak, and you're not going to find it in books, and you're not going to find it in words, and this and that, and so on and so forth. So what gives? Well, it's like you have to, like a field that you have to prepare. You have to plow the field, and you have to water it, and you have to arrange things so that you can plant the seeds, and so on and so forth. The mind is kind of like that. You have to prepare it. At least the modern mind, we're realizing that, and through the ages, we've realized that that's necessary for most people. Now, there's geniuses like Jesus, for example, or Buddha, or perhaps Ramana Maharshi or somebody like that. Perhaps I don't know him well enough. Well, I mean, he didn't say a whole lot. But so some people are just naturally gifted. But most of us, we have to do some work.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best work we'll ever do, though.
Mm-hmm. So when I read that, I tried to basically do the inquiry thing all the time, and that was pretty hard to do for me. Like for me now, staying in the center.
It's not hard. To be. Say it again. What you found difficult?
So like for now, staying in the center and just like staying relaxed when doing stuff, that is kind of normal. Like I'm able to do it. It's not a big deal.
Yeah,
but
progress. Good.
But then when I do this inquiry thing, if I start inquiring, like contemplating on it or thinking about it, I get lost and I lose track of what I was doing. And when I focus on the task at hand, then I forget about the like staying, like being aware of like the place where everything is coming from or happening. So I'm able to do one thing at a time.
That's fine. But you can do everything with this quiet intent inside your heart, your mind, your soul. This quiet openness to truth, to God, to reality, to the creative. And so this is just a quiet, like, it becomes part of you. It's in your marrow, right? It's and even though your mind may not be focused on it, your spirit, your soul, your essence, the heart of your tonal is, right? And so that stays with you all day and all night. And then your dreams start to evolve, and you start to be open to other ways of looking at things. And you don't automatically assume your mind's judgment is the correct judgment, or you may not even trust the judgment at all, and you may see the judgment as a limitation that your mind is imposing on you. So yes, in one way it's important, you're right, just do one thing at a time. But underneath all that, there's that quiet, incessant's the wrong word, that sounds too harsh, that quiet, pervasive, continuous intent. And that's the ocean that your mind has to swim in now. Has to swim in, but it bathes in. And sooner or later, things start to open, doors start to open up. Seek and you shall find. There's no question. Knock and the door will be open.
So when you say like having that quiet intent, is it like staying in the center and being relaxed and open? Is that the thing, or is it something else?
It's both of those. I mean, you should stay in the center and relaxed and not all tensed up and all freaked out just for your own health. and for your sense of well-being. I mean, that's just maintenance of the human body in the modern world, and that's part of the intent. It's not. It's like a prayer that you're saying constantly. And the external manifestation of it. I mean, a lot of people do mantra, right? I mean, if you look in the other parts of the world, there's this constant prayer, but that's just to saturate them. It's not absolutely necessary, but sometimes it fills up the mind with something, so the mind doesn't get up to its usual mischief of causing suffering. So if you're saying, gate, parasum gate, bodhisoha gate, paragate, parasum gate, bodhisoha gate, paragate, parasum. First of all, the vibrations are really nice, but also it fills up the space that the mind is a nasty little, I'm trying not to curse, a nasty little thing, and you got to keep that guy on a short leash, or dissolve it in love, in peace. We're going to have to stop soon. Is there any other questions?
I think maybe I can ask one more.
All right, here we go.
So I think this one, I don't know, it might be.
I really
too
appreciate
big,
you focusing on this book.
For the last question, it's on page 46, the Zen Meditation. It's basically they are saying that the Zen practice is not physical, nor verbal, nor mental.
Okay, this is really important because there's a huge misunderstanding. You know how the Sufis are equated with people dressing up in these colored robes and dancing around in circles? And that has about as much to do with Sufi practice as I don't know, squirrels do with rocket ships, right? So the same thing's true in Zen. In Zen, they imagine what Zen is sitting there and facing a wall for weeks and months, or hours every day or whatever, and that's not what Zen's about at all. What we see in this country and in Europe is basically a caricature of an imitation of a Japanese. It's just a big mess. Anyway.
So in the last sentence of this chapter.
Well, let me read the first paragraph because it's really good, I think. Yeah. Essential Zen meditation is not a matter of controlling thoughts and keeping the body immobile. So we cannot say that it is important to sit facing a wall and stop thinking. Also, it is not a matter of contemplating doctrinal principles. So we cannot say it is important to learn doctrinal principles. So way back in the day, I need to share this. The Zen centers were captured by psychopaths, and because it's easy to fake being a Zen master. You just have to be able to sit still and say confusing things, and people are so befuddled that they'll believe anything. But at least a couple of Zen centers literally were captured by psychopaths, and this is a great tragedy because Zen is one of the wonderful things we have of humanity. And so what's happened is people have confused the external, the container, with the content, as the Sufis would put it. And that's a great tragedy. And so books like these help. Because, this guy translated the Blue Cliff Record. Him and his brother were arguably the greatest Buddhist scholars of the last, 200-300 years. But in addition to that, at least Thomas was enlightened. And so it's a very precious thing that we have here. All right, so now what's the question? Thank you for letting me.
It's the last sentence in this chapter, which says, but the Zen work is not done by the body, the speech, or the intellect.
So what can be called important?
Yeah.
Perfect. So do you need to answer that question?
But everything I do is either through body or the mind, or even the practices that I do.
So what does that tell you?
Through that.
So what does that tell you?
That's not Zen.
Exactly. Zen teaching. Okay, sir?
Okay.
Anything else? That's perfect. So just answer that question. You're golden. All right?
Okay.
It's a perfect little
All
colon.
right.
All right. Ciao.